By the time of his state funeral in March 1953, the man the world knew affectionately as Uncle Joe Stalin had been dead for 4 days. The people of the Soviet Union wept openly for their dead leader. To the Russian people, Stalin was a savior, the great leader who had plucked them and the country from the jaws of Hitler's Nazis and kept the Americans at bay. As they filed past his corpse, few cared to recall that Stalin had another, darker reputation as the murderer of millions of his own people.
There are other words that you could use to describe him, but evil actually is a pretty good one.
Stalin turned Soviet Russia into one of the bloodiest killing grounds the world had ever seen.
As a direct result of Stalin's policies, something like 20 million over the period were arrested, maybe 7 million were shot.
Everything that he built turned to dust, and everything was simply destroyed.
In late 1923, Vladimir Lenin, the leader of the Bolshevik Party and father of the Russian Revolution, lay demented and dying near Moscow. He was obsessed by one question: who would succeed him as leader of the country? There were two front runners in the race: the dashing intellectual and founder of the Red Army, Leon Trotsky, and the ruthless 43-year-old party secretary, Joseph Stalin.
A lot of people believe that Trotsky was the natural successor. He had all of the intellectual, the ideological, the organizational ability, the personality to lead. He was a leader, the leader in the Civil War, of none of which qualities Stalin could share.
In southern Russia at the turn of the last century, Stalin excelled as a bank robber, agitator, and sometime assassin. Forever in and out of jail, the violence and paranoia which would mark him out in later years were already visible.
He had a very devious, cunning, and somewhat paranoid personality from an early stage. He clearly wasn't one of the lads.
For almost 20 years, Stalin was a hunted man. Only once in his early life did he experience anything that came close to normality. It wouldn't last.
He met this beautiful young Georgian girl, Yekaterina Svanidze, and they married, and she had a child, but contracted typhus, it is thought, and died. It is said that when he was at her graveside, he told the people there that a cold stone had entered his heart. He had lost all feeling for humanity.
In March 1917, the Russian Revolution erupted. The Tsar Nicholas II was deposed, and a year later, he and his entire family were shot. With the capital Petrograd in turmoil, Stalin's moment had come. Making his way across Russia from a prison camp in Siberia, he found a city filled with revolutionary soldiers. For Stalin, the endless imprisonment was about to pay off.
Throughout 1917, he was on all of the main organizing bodies of the Bolshevik Party in Petrograd, preparing for the revolution.
When a second revolution came in October of the same year, Lenin's Bolsheviks were in control, and Stalin was closer to the power he had always craved. With cold efficiency, Stalin began to maneuver himself into taking control of the party.
И однажды он меня с собой провел в большой театр, где происходило...
Once my brother took me to the Bolshoi in Moscow, where a big party meeting was being held. I was very excited. I wanted to hear Lenin and Trotsky speak.
Увидеть и услышать Ленина и Троцкого.
Standing next to Lenin and Trotsky on the stage that night was Stalin.
Мой брат толкнул меня локтем и сказал:
My brother nudged me and said, "That's the real dictator of Russia."
«Это фактически диктатор России».
In January 1924, Lenin died and Stalin saw the chance to seize power.
Stalin was in control of so much of the organization of the state and of the party, particularly of the party. Major committees were staffed by him. Once you have that sort of power of patronage, of putting people in place, they're your people.
I think what they saw in Stalin, yes, was a leader who was going to direct the party without the factional squabbles that they'd been listening to since 1921.
Aware of Stalin's real character, Lenin wrote just before his death,
Having become General Secretary, he has enormous power in his hands, and I am not sure that he always knows how to use that power with sufficient caution.
The party decided to ignore Lenin's warning about Stalin. It was a decision they and millions of others would soon regret.
Он был, это простое слово, он был
He was an
злопамятен,
unforgiving person,
феноменально злопамятен.
phenomenally
Все
unforgiving.
эти люди, которые
All those who somehow displeased him were doomed to die,
вызвали у него недовольство,
sooner or later.
были обречены рано или поздно.
Stalin took control, and by the end of the 1920s his hold on power was complete. A 30-year orgy of violence and terror was about to begin. In 1927, Stalin introduced his first 5-year plan for massive and accelerated industrialization of the Soviet Union. But for this great leap, as he called it, he needed one thing in abundance: food.
Food wasn't being supplied on the scale that they wanted it, and they couldn't therefore fund and continue with the huge industrialization program that they had. So the debate was settled in the end by Stalin, who said, okay, we're going to collectivize.
Stalin forced collectivization on the countryside, turning peasant smallholdings into massive state-controlled farms. And although party propaganda films showed life on the collective farms as some sort of paradise on earth, the reality was very different.
For the peasantry, it was a catastrophic disaster. And in the Ukraine in particular, where resistance to collectivization was at its strongest, a still untold number of millions of people died.
1 million people died in the northern Caucasus alone, some even resorting to cannibalism. Their suffering meant nothing to Stalin. He looked for scapegoats.
The ones who didn't like it were the most successful peasants, the so-called kulaks. And they were the ones who opposed collectivization because they had most to lose. So you just take the kulaks and either you kill them or you send them somewhere to the far north and let them settle there and they'll die out. And 5 million such people died purely as a result of the collectivization.
Those who weren't killed by Stalin were sent to work camps called gulags. Deliberately situated in the harshest areas of Russia, prisoners were turned into slave laborers and worked to death. Huge industrial schemes like the Dnieper Dam or the Belomor Canal became a living hell for hundreds of thousands who died during their construction.
Nobody told us anything whatsoever, no reason why we're there, why they took us there, you know, what we've done wrong, why we're there. Nobody told us anything. We've just been taken as a slave, you know.
Maria Sklugotsky was 18 years old in 1939 when she and her entire family were deported from their home in southern Poland to a labor camp in Siberia.
People were that packed, we could hardly move at all in the train. But I know a lot of people, I was seeing some people and children thrown away from the train when there was death. That's it. Nobody was buried.
After a 3-month train journey, Maria and her family arrived in Krasnoyarsk in eastern Siberia.
We had to go to work, you see, to forest. Because they says, if you don't go to work, we don't get any food whatsoever. We've been working, cutting trees, you know, and that in forest. I had to work on my knees from trees to trees, you know, because snow was very, very high. If you walk, you should just fall deep in it. People die just like flies. Children, and particularly young people, nearly all died. You die, that's it.
Not that their fates would ever move Stalin. He once commented, "One death is a tragedy, a million deaths is simply a statistic."